I always like to take a picture of the crowd with somebody holding up this sign. The only thing is we're going to take the picture from the back because we realize that some people might not have photo clearances. So when you're taking the picture, I just ask you all to look up front. So is there somebody who will hold this sign up right over their head? Oh, give it to this guy here.
Yeah, Jordan.
Okay. And Emily, you want to go in the back there? She'll take a quick picture. And like I said, look at me. Unless you don't want to look at me, but anyway, you can look at the screen. And you hold that up high so she can say, okay, did you see the sign? No. Okay, no, I'm talking about her. Okay, there you go. All set? Yeah, everybody please look this way. This is only for your benefit, not ours. Okay, everybody just look up at the screen. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much. All right.
Let's go.
Okay, now that we got that out of the way. Okay, what we're going to talk about here today, and you'll see it up on the screen, it says taking down tobacco. But there's one thing that's going on that's quite prevalent. You know it yourself. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's pretty much something called vaping. And there's been a lot of misinformation out there concerning vaping. And my job here is to kind of let you know what exactly it's all about. And also what's happening, because every day in the news there's something new that they're talking about. So we're going to begin with this little video here. Some of these commercials you may have seen on TV. I thought it's kind of cute to start off with some of this stuff.
Vaping can deliver nicotine to your brain, reprogramming you to crave more and more. Don't get hacked. I've been vaping, but it's safer than smoking.
You know, one jewel pod contains as much nicotine as 20 cigarettes. 26.
Did you know that one jewel pod contains 20 cigarettes of nicotine? That is completely absurd. Now we know what you're thinking. You think this is weird and creepy? But you're the one watching puppet ASMR, you freak.
Honestly, yeah guys, I've been vaping, but it's safer than smoking.
Not really, because if you vape, you're 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes anyway.
Huh, 4 times is nothing, bro.
Sure it is. Imagine having 4 times as many cats.
Or 4 times worse vision. Or 4 times more of Kyle.
Whoa, that's a lot.
If you vape, you're 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes.
Vaping is like safer than... Vaping is safer than smoking.
Is that a hand? Am I a puppet? Is any of this real? If I'm not real, how am I thinking this? Hey, he's kind of cute. Is he real? I want to kiss him.
Okay.
Gross.
What a great way to start the morning with pukey puppets, okay? So, these are some commercials that have been running on TV as part of the Truth campaign. I personally haven't seen them, but usually they're run on channels that are usually aimed at youth. And there's a lot more to it than just what they're talking about here, besides the fact that a jewel pod contains as much as a pack of cigarettes. So what we're going to talk about here today is tobacco products centering on e-cigarettes. But the thing is, we have to still talk about other tobacco products because people are still using other tobacco products. Talk about the health effects, harmful marketing tactics. You're going to see how they advertise things to make it look like there's something that they're not. And using the power of your voice to help take down tobacco. And there are things that you can do. One of the things we do in some of the schools, the home schools that you're coming from, is train people your age to become peer educators so they can go ahead and talk to the younger kids about this. Because sometimes you're a little bit more effective in that than I would be a stranger. Just like today, I'm just a stranger coming into your school. But usually if it's a kid in their school hearing the message I'm giving, sometimes they listen to it a little bit better. So we're going to start off with this, is that tobacco is still the #1 preventable cause of death in the world. I mean, imagine every year 6 million people dying from tobacco use. That's quite a bit. Okay. So it's a problem for everyone, and we're going to show how it is. Even if you don't use it, it still becomes a problem because of some of the other things that are caused by using these products. So when we're talking about non-smokers, the economy, people who are targeted by it, the environment, everyone, youth, and of course, smokers. And the problem is that this is a product that when used as intended will kill half of its users. That's what we know about cigarettes. But we're beginning to find out things about e-cigarettes. And we're finding them out very quickly as to what they're doing to people's bodies. Okay, we'll just skip that here. Okay, what you're seeing here is probably something you might see in the middle of the street or in the street corners on the drains, that when people toss out their cigarette butts, usually they don't keep them in the car. For some reason, they like to share them with everybody else by throwing them out the window. And so what happens is you get an awful lot of litter. But what I'm seeing too is not only cigarette butts are being tossed, even the little jewel pods. People are done with them. They're not throwing them in the garbage. They're just tossing them out into parking lots. And if a little kid or an animal picks it up, bites into it, that fluid that's in there, it only takes like 1 teaspoon of vape juice to actually go ahead and cause a little kid to go ahead and go into the hospital because the effect that the nicotine has on their bodies. So we're talking about litter, and we're talking about a lot of litter. 4.5 trillion cigarette butts a year, 3 out of 4 people toss their products out the window. They're not biodegradable, and that means they don't break down over time. And the jewel pod, forget about that. If you see these things, they're made of hard plastic and there's metal inside along with whatever residual juice is left over from that. And that really causes one heck of a problem environmentally and for animals or whatever. We hear a lot about the plastic straw thing, but you never hear about what tobacco waste is causing in the environment. That's kind of strange. Because we're talking about something that's not biodegradable and also 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, they told me that after 4 seconds. Oh, hello. Okay, that when the bell goes off, wait 4 seconds and start talking. So you're getting a lot of these things that don't break down and end up in different places. So I'll show you a little video about, like, somebody tosses a cigarette where it ends up sometimes.
Cigarettes are not just dangerous when they're smoked. They're dangerous long after. Cigarette butts are toxic. They release chemicals that poison our water and harm wildlife. And millions are polluting our environment.
So think about it. If you go ahead and you toss one of these things in the street, there's the drain, and they go and get washed into the drain. They go into reservoirs or whatever, and sometimes they end up in very strange places. But the fact is, they're releasing some toxic chemicals into that environment that normally wouldn't be there if they wouldn't toss them away so carelessly. Which leads us to what is nicotine, because that's what we're dealing with. When we're talking about e-cigarettes, the first thing we're concerned with is the effect that nicotine has on you. Nicotine reprograms your brain. Think of your brain as a brand new computer. Did you ever get one? You press the buttons, boom, boom, you get everywhere. You call it the program pops right up. But you notice after a while, after you start putting programs in there, or you go online, everything starts slowing down. That's because something has been put into that computer that switches the way that information starts getting to where it needs to go. It's taking detours instead of going straight ahead. That's what nicotine does. The younger you start using a product that contains nicotine, like an e-cigarette or smokeless tobacco, whatever, it is reprogramming your brain. What happens is that your brains are still wiring right now. You know, just kind of make their little connections in there. But you introduce the nicotine into that brain. Now it creates nicotine receptors. And in order for the brain to want to work better, if you get addicted to nicotine and you don't get that into your brain is kind of like crying out. It's making you feel nervous. It's making you feel stressed until you get that drug back in there. So what happens is your brain is now, it's been detoured. The nicotine has caused your little patterns, the way your brain works, to change. The younger you start, the more receptors. Okay? Everybody count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. 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 Okay, we're back up. So, think about that. Every time you're taking a puff, your brain is being reprogrammed. These things are designed for addiction. They made them more addictive, more attractive to people your age, and even more deadly. And the tobacco people know it. And one thing to keep in mind, because sometimes I'm reading stories online that come from the vaping industry, and they're saying, oh, you know, you're trying to ban all these flavors so that big tobacco starts getting the money. They own a bunch of e-cigarette companies. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest cigarette companies in the world owns about 35% of Juul. And you'll see a little bit later what that has gotten them. So the tobacco industry is involved with e-cigarettes. So, you know, for those people who are trying to say, you know, if we're trying to, you know, ban the flavors or whatever, we're trying to favor the tobacco industry, no, we're not. Because they're being affected by that too. And this is an industry that said nicotine is addictive. We're in the business of selling nicotine. And that's what they're in the business of selling, because without the nicotine, they wouldn't have much of a customer base. They got to pull you in. They got to get you in. They got to get you addicted to the product. And what's the reason for that? Because you need to get more product. And what do you have to do to get more product? You got to pay for the product. So somebody kind of gets a little rich off of your addiction. So there's other tobacco products that are out there. The first one, snus. That's the one right at the end there, F. And you may have seen them, the little packets of tobacco go between the cheek and gum. Of course, you got your e-cigarettes. You got your water pipe right here. They call it hookah. I gotta be careful the way you say that. I say hookah. Make sure you say ah at the end. And when you're using one of these things, especially with other people, you're sharing everything that they have. It's water droplets. I mean, if they have a cold or a virus, you know, you're sharing a thing, you're getting the cold and the virus. If you're using the mouthpieces that haven't been cleaned properly, hey, if they have mononucleosis, you can get mononucleosis. But that's the minor part. When you're using one of these things, since it's burning on the top, there's an awful lot of carbon monoxide that is created in the air. Carbon monoxide robs the air of oxygen, and that has an effect especially on your heart. So that's not a safe way of using tobacco. Of course, there's the chewing tobacco, the little cigars, and of course, cigarettes. And when you're looking at a cigarette, you're looking at a product, even though when you look at it, it doesn't look that way. It contains about 600 ingredients. When you burn them, it creates 7,000 chemicals, and some of those chemicals are known to cause cancer. That's a cigarette. But e-cigarettes are made entirely of chemicals. All right, now if you go on their websites, they'll say, oh, but some of these things have been approved by the FDA. Yeah, for eating, for ingestion, not for heating up and inhaling into your lungs. So the flavors that you see in an e-cigarette, there's a bunch of chemicals mixed together to make it taste like a gummy bear, make it taste like whatever flavor you're inhaling into your lungs. It's not natural flavor. it is a mix of chemicals that taste like a flavor. So in cigarettes, you have these different kind of compounds, chemicals that are in there. And in an e-cigarette, you got a bunch of chemicals too. On top of the chemicals, though, you've got metal, which you normally don't find in a cigarette. And why is there metal? Because what heats up the juice, whether it's in a Juul pump, a Juul, whether it's in one of the mods, the bigger ones, the more expensive ones, whatever, there's a metal wick in there that heats up to heat up the vape juice. And part of that, the molecules of the metal go into the vape juice, and now you're getting those in the body, and they collect over time. They go ahead and build up in your body, and they can cause problems. So other tobacco products, we already talked about that. But here's the whole thing. 81 of you who ever used tobacco products started with a flavored product. And you'll see up on here we have a gummy worm. Okay, so if you like gummy worms, what do? You go to the store, you buy the gummy worms, bag of gummy worms, you take it home, or maybe after you get out of the store, you open up the bag, you pull out the gummy worm, and you eat it. How many people have ever bought a gummy worm, lit it up, and tried to smoke it? There we go. We have one person right over there. Yes. There's always one person in the audience that says that they've smoked a gummy worm. Tell me, how messy was it? Because it started to melt and stuff like that, right? Got all over your fingers. Yeah. Okay. I know you're kidding around, but you wouldn't smoke a gummy worm. At least, but you know, I'm going to tell you, I was at school one time, and I mentioned that, and a bunch of hands went up. I said, "You've got to be kidding." They says, "Well, we were in science class, and the teacher wanted to show us how things change when you burn them." I said, "But you didn't inhale it." They said, "No, but we did set a gummy worm on fire." So if somebody puts their hands up, sometimes they say, "Well, maybe they're doing experiments." But normally you don't smoke a gummy worm. You eat them. You don't inhale them into your lungs. Different types of products that have come out. There's, in the beginning, they look like cigarettes. That's why they call them e-cigarettes. Then people start getting technical. They start doing variations. Then they start coming out with vape pens. Then they start coming out with mods. And what mods do, you can go ahead and adjust them so you can get that gigantic cloud that you see some people producing. And we're aware of the term cloud chasing. Does anybody know what cloud chasing means? By putting your hand up, don't worry, you're not going to get in trouble. You just may have heard what it means. Hey, somebody back there knows what cloud chasing means? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that? Oh, okay, well, it's not really to get popular. Cloud chasing is when somebody tries to produce the biggest amount of e-cigarette cloud. You know, instead of just having a little bit of the vapor coming out, it's a gigantic thing. That's what they call cloud chasing. And people try to get the biggest cloud that they possibly can. And using some of the devices at the end, you can get more of a cloud. But the more of the cloud that you're producing, the more garbage you're inhaling into your lungs. And of course, they're all pretty much made the same. Of course, they may look different. You've got the battery, you've got the thing that actually, it's called an atomizer, that actually makes the vapor, the cloud. The cartridge that has the stuff in it, of course, there's a mouthpiece. And what we're beginning to see from use of e-cigarettes in young people is things like wet lung. What wet lung is that your lungs start filling up with fluid because you put something in there that they're not used to. And especially if you're young and your lungs is still developing, I mean, that damages the lungs. If you damage your lungs, they stay that way. At the point of damage, you're not going to get any better. I mean, if you have a cold, if you have phlegm, that's different. That's what your lungs are producing. But if you go ahead and damage the inside of your lungs, they're going to stay damaged for the rest of your life. And as you get older, you're going to notice more and more of that damage. So this story actually comes from down in Sunbury, which is down toward the middle of the state. And a young girl started using an e-cigarette. She ends up in the emergency room because her lungs are filled with fluid, which means she couldn't breathe too well. The other thing is called popcorn lung. And the reason they call it popcorn lung is not because your lungs are filled with popcorn. All right, I know the picture shows that, but that's not what it is. It's because the chemical used is a chemical they used in popcorn factories to create that butter flavor that you get off your microwave popcorn. And people who were working in the factories were beginning to find a lung cancer because they were inhaling that chemical. So when this came out, some of the vape companies went ahead and says, oh, we're going to take diacetyl or diacetyl, however it's pronounced, out of it. Well, that was fine, but there's still, what you're still left with was a whole bunch of other chemicals. So you've got that going on there. Some symptoms, and I'm going to tell you, if you are using an e-cigarette product and you start experiencing symptoms like I said here, dry cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, fever, body aches, drenching night sweats, nosebleeds, get yourself to a doctor, because you're going to see a little bit later about what's happening with some people who start off with those symptoms. Now, basically what's in the e-cigarette juice, like I said, are chemicals. The two most common ones they use is called propylene glycol, basically that's something that's an antifreeze, and vegetable glycerin. Even though the FDA says that they are safe things to use in food products, it is not safe to heat up and inhale into your lungs. The other 10% of an e-cigarette juice is made up of flavoring, once again, a bunch of chemicals made to taste like something, and if there's nicotine in them, nicotine. And that's one thing I want to point out too, because some people tell me, well, I use vape juice that doesn't have nicotine in it. And I say, number one, why would you even go ahead and use something like this? I mean, you want flavor. You don't inhale flavor into your lungs, you eat. That's how you get flavor. And number two is that even in some of these things that say that they're low, no nicotine, they always found little levels of it in there. It doesn't take much nicotine to get the brain started on addiction. But even if you're a vape that have any nicotine in it, all the chemicals are still harming your body. Okay, already talked. Some other things found in vape juice. Formaldehyde. Does anybody here know what formaldehyde is used for? Figuring it's a technical school, I probably figure somebody knows what formaldehyde is used for. Right there, sir. It's embalming fluid. Yes. Something that preserves dead tissue. Ugh. Yes. And formaldehyde is used as a preservative. And it's been found in some vape juices. And even the secondhand aerosol. And the reason, I mean, vaping is the term that has become popular, but it is so misleading because a vapor is like when you're boiling a pot of water. And you know, you see the steam coming up. That's a vapor. And an aerosol is when there are particulates, bits of stuff in that cloud that get embedded into your lungs. So even though vaping is the term we're used to, and that's why I use it every once in a while, it's the worst term to use because it's actually aerosolizing. And that's a clumsy word, you trip all over it. But you're breathing in stuff. You're breathing in a lot of stuff. And even people who are around it, even though it might smell like a candy or smell like something else, it's still, those chemicals are getting into the lungs of people who are around it, especially if you're young, a little baby. Okay, so, eye, ear, throat irritation. They're finding out that nicotine is a gateway drug. As a matter of fact, last week we had a big conference for the colleges, and I had, as one of the speakers at my section, a doctor who was talking about lung cancer. And she made the point, she says, you know, you hear a lot about gateway drugs. She says, but nicotine is the #1 gateway drug, meaning it leads to the use of other things. You want to go for the bigger high. You want to go ahead and see how much further you can go with this kind of stuff. So, defective e-cigarette batteries that cause fires. There's third-hand vapor. That's what's on your clothes. So, if you think that, you know, if you are vaping or trying to sneak it, it's very easy to detect if you come back into a room after you vape, because all of a sudden you smell like whatever the heck you're vaping. Normally, if you eat something, you only smell it on your breath. If it's on your clothes, pretty good sign you're vaping. So, just like last school year when I came before classes, I start talking about the batteries. That in some of these devices, the batteries aren't stable. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, and I'm not saying every vape product has a problem with the batteries, but there's been enough problems that led to this young man right here dying because it exploded because it was right near his mouth. And what happened is it was like shrapnel. Pieces of metal were embedded into his head and actually cut his artery, and well, he's not with us anymore. The story on the bottom here, same thing, Florida man died last May after suffering a head wound from an exploding cigarette. So then what started coming out last year, seizures. We were seeing that young people were starting to have seizures when they were using some of these products because of the effect that high-powered nicotine was having on their brain. So that's what I was talking about. Okay, now you got to worry about seizures. Then, a month ago, all of a sudden, this started happening. Illinois teen has lungs of 70-year-old after vaping for more than a year. Vaping-related illnesses soared to 805 as death toll hits 12, and last night, I had to add a new headline. Now it's up to 16. And these are only reportable cases. Because some people probably have died from this, but it wasn't connected with their vaping. Vaping suspected in half dozen cases at St. Luke's of Lehigh Valley. And then you see the picture over there a mother took of her son. He had to be hospitalized, and they had to put him in what they call a medically induced coma to make him rest, so they could try to get that fluid out of his lungs. So it's not happening to old people, because when you usually talk about cigarettes, we're talking about long-term effects. We're beginning to see short-term effects of vaping, and this is just the beginning. So because of this, what happens? Walmart is stopping selling e-cigarettes. Media companies are not showing their advertisement. Juul actually stopped their advertisements. And then they got rid of their CEO, their chief executive officer, the head of the company. But you got to see who they replaced it with to find out what they're really thinking. They replaced their CEO with a tobacco executive. The very same people who are selling a product that they pretty much lied about, smoking, to say it had other, that it was cool, it was, they denied that it was addictive and all that stuff. So now the head of Juul is actually a tobacco company executive. So you can see who's running the show here. In states, some people are thinking about bans. As a matter of fact, even in this country, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, are now putting together rules to go ahead and do the same thing. Even the president said it when he was talking to the reporters, he said, don't vape. In the history of this country, there's never been a president who said don't smoke or don't vape, and that's how bad this has gotten because of what they're seeing happening with these products. And if Juul wants to tell us that they didn't advertise to kids, guess what? We have the ads. And you can see in these ads, you've got young people. These are the early Juul ads when they first came out. And then they tried to go ahead and popularize words like vaporized and things like that. The one in the middle isn't exactly Juul, that's another type of e-cigarette. But they were using young models. They were using young voices in their advertisements. We know who they were aiming at. So this is the Juul pod. Remember I mentioned why it's tough when you go ahead and throw one of these things away? Well, you can see it's made out of plastic, and right here you just got the metal wick. So that's quite a bit of garbage if you're tossing them aside. And even if you toss them in the garbage, they won't break down for, it's going to be a long time that they'll break down into anything. So what are the concerns with Juul? Because Juul is the most widely used product. We're trying to point out there that what's in Juul is a salt-based nicotine. Of course, I mentioned any products. What does that mean? They put salt in their nicotine. No, it means that the nicotine is released more effectively. So when somebody takes a hit off of Juul, the first puff, they're getting quite a kick of nicotine very quickly to their brain. And if you're using one Juul pod, you're actually using the equivalent of nicotine that's in a pack of cigarettes. I've heard studies that show that it's even more than that, because it depends on how often you use it. If you're using like an e-cigarette or a mod or one of the vape pens, because you think it's safe, you're inhaling deeper, especially if you're trying to make those gigantic clouds that you see. Or you're using it more because you think, this is just water vapor. And that's what a lot of the billboards say that by these vape shops. It's not smoke, it's water vapor. And usually I'm yelling out the car window. It's not water vapor, it's aerosol, but it's kind of strange since I'm in the car alone. People probably think there's some nutcase yelling at a billboard out there. But they're trying to make you believe it's something it's not. And here's the thing that I worry about too, is since we succeeded in getting a lot of people to quit actual smoking, lighting up a cigarette, they're finding out that about 30% of e-cigarette users, young ones, start trying the actual lit product, back to the regular cigarette. When they're asking them what's in them, most of them thought it was just flavoring. Okay, once again, I want to plant in your mind when they say flavoring, I want you to think chemicals at once. Some didn't know what was in it, some admitted, yeah, there's nicotine, and some others said marijuana. And we're finding out that that is true in some cases, not because a Juul has marijuana in it, is that people are sometimes spiking their e-cigarette juice with THC, which is a component of marijuana. And that's where some of those deaths have come from. Because when you mix that in with all the other chemicals that are in e-cigarette juice, you're creating other chemicals that are having an effect on the lung. So that's why if somebody's offering you a hit off of an e-cigarette, hey, why don't you try this? It's a new flavor, it's fish dirt. Here, why don't you go ahead and give this a try? And you go ahead and you take it, oh yeah, that's right, that really does taste like dirt and fish. Yeah, that's really amazing. But you don't know if they spiked it with something. Especially if you have some of these homegrown people that go ahead and experiment with their own juices. Don't take a hit out of somebody's e-cigarette because you don't know what they may have put in it. And basically, you don't vape at all. That's the message we're trying to give. But be aware of that. So let's see how much you listen to me here, okay? Basically, this is true or false. They have claim or fact. Claim meaning false, fact meaning true. Okay, so e-cigarettes produce harmless water vapor. True or false? Oh, you listen. Aha. That's right. They produce an aerosol that contains nicotine and other toxins. All right. E-cigarettes don't contain nicotine. True or false?
False.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Good. Wow. Yeah, that's a good one right there. And most of them do. Even if it did, the mixture of chemicals is still hazardous to your body. Okay. Here's one I didn't actually address. But let's see if you know the answer. E-cigarettes help smokers quit. Okay. False, that's right.
True.
If you were somebody who had a problem, say you were an alcoholic, right? And you go to somebody and you say, I want to stop drinking. And the person says, what are you drinking? Oh, I'm drinking whiskey. All right. So the person says, I tell you what, stop drinking the whiskey, just drink a 6-pack of beer a day. You'd probably say, well, wait a minute, I'm still drinking alcohol, ain't I? Ain't I? Yes, I used the word ain't. Improper English. Okay, that's 1 point off with me. Thank you very much. I think you got an English major. Thank you, yes. But if I do use the word ain't, please forgive me. I come from Northeast Pennsylvania. But the thing is that quitting is quitting. It's not replacing. If somebody is using an e-cigarette instead of a cigarette, all they've done is replace the way they get chemicals and nicotine into their body. Now, if somebody used an e-cigarette for a short time, quit smoking altogether, that's fine, but the proof is not there. Most people are switching to e-cigarettes or using cigarettes and e-cigarettes at the same time. They really don't help you to quit. They just help you to replace the way you're doing the nicotine. So the health effects. Some of these are also related to smoking too. But since nicotine constricts your blood vessels, what happens is that it restricts the flow of blood to your skin. So you start looking old a lot quicker. Gum disease. And before I would only say, well, smoking causes that. Well, guess what? Now dentists are finding out that people who are vaping are developing gum disease, some of them. Of course, they hurt the lungs, especially if you're in sports. First thing you can do is put something into your lungs that's going to go ahead and take away how your lungs work. If you're getting scarring in your airways or you're restricting your airways, you can't operate 100%, especially if you're doing sports. Okay, that usually happens if you're smoking, you get those fingertips, that's a little bit, they show a little bit more than actually what happens there, but they don't do that. Of course, nicotine's effect on the brain, And this is important. Using these products makes stress even worse. You've heard people say, I smoke or I vape because I'm nervous. No, the reason you got nervous is you got addicted to the nicotine. And when you don't get the nicotine, your brain starts firing. Remember I told you about how it all mixes in your head and creates little receptors. So it actually makes it worse with the stress you're feeling. Part of that is the addiction to the drug. And until your brain gets that drug back in there, it's not going to be happy. Okay, and an average smoker is like 10 years sooner. Okay, here's a commercial you may have seen on TV.
That menthol, it's not enough.
Wait for the crack.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Ah, there we go.
What's a pack of menthols cost? Your teeth. Smoking menthols or regular cigarettes can cause serious gum disease that makes you more likely to lose them. Say it again. What are menthols costing you?
Okay, so one thing to mention about menthol, whether you're using it in a cigarette or an e-cigarette, menthol is like an anesthetic. The coolness you feel is because the menthol deadens the nerves in the back of your throat, so it feels cool, but actually it makes you inhale even deeper. I have a question as to whether I'm going to show the next video or not. How many people here are aware of people using smokeless tobacco chew? Okay, if you, all right, well then I'll show you the video.
Show me.
When you see yourself like that, it's hard to believe that it all began in a can of dip. Then you start to look back. When your teeth started getting loose, when you ignored the signs, when you thought white patches were no big deal, when you believed a can of dip could do no harm. Dip can cause mouth cancer. Smokeless doesn't mean harmless.
Okay, now that's a special effect. It really looks like that. But in my long career at the Lung Association, one time I took around a guy who actually had mouth cancer around the schools. And they had to remove like his jaw from here. So it was just kind of like his jaw ended here, this side of the face was caved in. And there's actually a woman that comes from not too far away from here who smoked and got oral cancer. And the only way they had to save their life is to remove it, which was kind of made it disfiguring. So I just wanted to show you that in case, like I saw hands going up about smokeless, that's still a problem too. Okay, so when we're talking about secondhand smoke, that's what comes off the end of any of these products or being blown out of somebody's body. And people are affected by secondhand smoke or vaping. And for adults, it can cause heart disease, lung cancer, stroke, harms babies before and after they're born, especially kids. If they have ear infections, they get more ear infections, and if they have asthma, it's even worse. And for people who, for some reason, can't make a connection with people getting sick, it can hurt your dogs and kitties too. Right? So the cause of the problem is simple. It's the people who are marketing this stuff and making it. The company on the top is the one we had mentioned before about the CEO becoming, the tobacco executive becoming the CEO. And that's Philip Morris. They make Marlboro cigarettes. And they own 35% of Juul. And they thought it was going to be very profitable for them to do. But with all this mess, I think we're finding out that they really made a bad investment. But just about every cigarette company has their own version of an e-cigarette. So they are involved. So even though the people on the internet try to go ahead and tell us that we're trying to save the cigarette industry, no, because they're part of this too. They spend a lot of money advertising, and they even pay people who put together video games to somewhere include on that environment that you see on the screen, if you're driving down the road or something, billboards that might not exactly mention a particular vape product, but it'll show an advertisement that will look like it'd be for vaping. It's subliminal. You don't notice it, but yet your brain is registering that. So they know how to get that stuff into your head, and they spend a lot of money to do that. I mean, $9.1 billion just to kind of even it out a little bit. It's enough to feed over 8 million families in the USA every month. They spend $18 to every $1 that's spent on prevention. So they have us beat with the money, that's for sure.
Not the Flintstones! No!
These cures
That's not real.
Brought to you by Winston.
Oh, man. There are people that, like, murder you to see this today.
I've
seen this. This is just ridiculous.
Children watch the show.
Flintstones?
I take their vitamins.
Makes you wonder what else is bad now.
I take their vitamins. Those nasty Flintstones. Well, you gotta remember the Flintstones, they're a cartoon. As a matter of fact, they were very popular. And I think on MeTV now, they're showing all the old Flintstone shows. The only thing they're not going to show you is the commercials that they used to run during the first couple of years of when Flintstones were on TV. The Flintstones were on at night. I mean, when I grow up, there were Saturday morning cartoons. But a show like the Flintstones had such popularity that it was a nighttime animated show. I mean, it's a lot different than what you see, you know, like Family Guy, Bob's Burgers, things like that. There's a big difference between them both. There is no Stewie in the Flintstones, okay? But it was popular. And so they knew that they had an adult audience that was watching with the kids too. But the kids are sitting there and all of a sudden they're watching, you know, Fred and Wilma lighting up a cigarette, which makes them think there must be anything wrong with that if the Flintstones are smoking. Which then makes me explain to them the Flintstones are only a drawing, folks. You know, they don't really exist. They only exist on a piece of paper or on film. But they knew how to get into the minds of young people. So when they go around telling us that they didn't want to advertise to young people, we know that they're lying. Just like Jules said, they didn't want young people to use their product. So that leads us to, why is there a problem? Flavors are bringing people into using nicotine. They're cheaper than cigarettes. The packaging is colorful, and if you ever go see a vape shop or even a vape stand in a mall, they have a lot of different bottles with a lot of different colorings that go on there too. So they have definitely got their product out there. They go ahead and target various different types of nationality, ethnicities and whatnot. And they will, you know, focus their advertisement to aim at that particular group. But here's the message I give. A lot of people say you're being targeted and go, oh, I'm being targeted. Oh, if you're targeted, that doesn't mean you have to step and, you know, if somebody's using a bow and arrow and you're the target, you can run away from the bow and arrow so somebody doesn't use you as a target. So targeting is fine, and so they want to use the term, but they're the ones who's making the decision whether or not you're going to allow them to, you know, fool around your head enough to make you want to use the product. So don't feel helpless all because somebody says you're being targeted. You make your own decisions. You're the ones responsible for what you're putting in your body and things like that. It's up to you to go ahead and make these decisions not to use these products. I mean, me being here today is only to let you know this is what's really going on. This is what's really, you know, what these juices are made of, what you're putting into your body. And then you leave here making that decision saying, I'm not going to use this stuff anymore. Why the heck would I want to go ahead and mess myself up now? And it's going to have an effect when I'm older, or it's going to have an effect right now like we see with some of these young people ending up in hospitals. So you might be targeted, but it's up to you not to become the target. So exploiting culture. You know, they'll go ahead and sell sometimes cigarettes saying they're 100% additive-free, natural tobacco. Well, guess what, folks? Natural tobacco still contains natural nicotine, and it still contains natural tar. Tobacco naturally contains these substances. So even though you can say it's additive-free, that doesn't mean it's safe. Menthol cigarettes are always aimed, especially at the young or African Americans, to get them to use it. If you can't afford full price, well, there's stores out there that will sell them at low prices or sell bargain brands just to keep you, addicted to that nicotine. Sometimes they'll sell other types of tobacco products at cheap, like 69 cents for a single, 99 cents for a two-pack. That's usually with cigars, things like that. But here's what is important. 95% of people begin to use these things before the age of 21. Now, one thing that we've done in the state is that there's a bill that raises the age to 21. Got through the Senate, hopefully it gets through the House and will be passed into law. But since so many people begin before the age of 21, we can see why people get addicted so young, especially since your brains are still being wired and they will accept that nicotine very readily and get you addicted very quickly. And the reason they need you guys, because for every one smoker who dies of a tobacco-related illness, they have to replace it with two of you guys at your age. That's where their replacement customer. As a matter of fact, the tobacco guys said, these are secret papers that were uncovered, by the way. Younger adult smokers are the only source of replacement smokers. If younger adults turn away from smoking, the industry will decline. Well, guess what? That should make you feel really empowered. That if you don't use their product, they go away. And that's the best way for things to happen, because I know they do try to have bans and whatnot, people go underground, still sell this stuff. But if you quit, there's no longer customers, and I don't have to go ahead and go around doing these programs anymore because we will have succeeded in stopping this craziness that's going on. 5.6 million youth under 18 today will probably die prematurely from smoking. The good news is regular smoking, cigarettes, went down quite a bit. But look at the difference. The bad news is e-cigarette use increased. As a matter of fact, in just 1 year, it increased quite a bit. 27% of high school students are using it. That's like more than 1 in 4. So, just to go ahead and point out that a product that's supposed to be aimed at adults is not being used that much by adults. The biggest users of these products are high school students, people your age, and middle school students. Young adults, 18 to 24, maybe about 7.5%. Adult use of e-cigarettes is only 3%. So supposedly the people that they're trying to reach with e-cigarettes are the ones who use them the least. They need you because you're the ones who are still growing and can get addicted very quickly. The ads are no different than they were for tobacco. Tobacco ad on the left, e-cigarette ad on the right. Marlboro man there, whoever that guy is there. He has a beard, he has a scruffy beard, so I guess they figured out to put it on the advertisement. Using cartoons to sell the product. Using flavorings to sell the product. Using movie stars to sell the product. Of course, the movie stars that you see here were big in their time. You might not even know what they are. But can anybody tell me who the lady in the middle is? Who's selling some sort of e-cigarette? And I can tell by your response that she's totally unknown to all of you. Her name is Jenny McCarthy, and basically all she's known for is that she posed in Playboy. But, since she's getting older, she had to find some way of making money, so she started doing commercials for e-cigarettes. And the solution doesn't lie with me. I only present information. It's you who makes the final decision. And I'm hoping that after today, I got you thinking. So that every time you're inhaling on one of these products, all you can imagine is this chemical soup going into your lungs, chasing you away to lung works. Imagine the nicotine getting into your system, going to your brain, and reprogramming it. That device becomes, it's the ball and chain. That's what's controlling what you're doing. You're in school here. If you're using the product, you start feeling nervous. I gotta go ahead and get a hit of nicotine. Who's in control? Definitely not you, it's a device with the nicotine in it that's telling you what to do. You want to be strong and independent? Then you don't get addicted to anything that runs your life. So you're the ones who have to make that final decision. For those of you, and I do go to some of your schools too, we also like to go to the schools and try to get groups of youth together to actually help getting the message out. So, look for that. There's sometimes tobacco-free groups in schools. Something that you can actually become part of. And to make a difference. You want to make a difference in the world? This is a great way to do it. For your friends around you, and for others you might not even know. So that's my story, folks. And you make that decision not to use it. You use your power of independence and strength, and you can get off this stuff or decide never to use it at all. So, do we have time for just maybe 1 or 2 questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes, the gentleman back there, yes. I'm coming back so I can hear you better. Okay? I won't put the microphone on you. Go ahead. Very good. He says, aren't they making nicotine mints? You're right, they are. There's nicotine products that look like Tic Tacs in stores. And once again, what do you think it's for? It's just to go ahead and make sure you get nicotine in your system. And especially if you're young, to make them in such a way that it looks harmless, that it looks like a Tic Tac. So there are other products that they're trying to get people to use too that contain nicotine. One more question. Unless there are no more questions. Question? Okay. All right then, folks. Well, I'm done with you. I hope you go ahead and listen to what I said. Thank you.
What was it like to smoke a gummy worm?
That explains where you're